Hi everyone, Said here. Really sorry for not uploading last week. I have actually been trying to record and stuff for the past 2 weeks, but I've just never been satisfied with the result. Like either it's too long or I'm rambling or I just need to flesh out my thoughts a little bit more. So yeah, hopefully I'm able to keep to the topic at hand and keep this short. We'll see. Now, I hope everyone's doing well, staying safe and healthy, and if you're from the Northern Hemisphere, as I am, then hopefully winter is treating you well and not too depressing. We currently have this, we had snow last week. However, now it's been raining and it's really windy and cold. So the roads are very interesting. Like yesterday when I went to the store, I have a front wheel drive car and it felt like it was a rear wheel with summertime tires on and just going like this, unnecessarily. Like I enjoy that sometimes, but it gets frustrating at a certain point. But anyways, yeah. Now, I really want to talk about something that has been inspired by the recent release of Dragon Age the Veilguard, and it is related to the topic of this video, so my writing and writing in general and inclusion and representation and all that. However, like I mentioned, I need to flesh out my thoughts a little bit more on this and make it more coherent, and definitely it needs to be in a separate video because that can turn out very long and I don't want to have two very long videos on my channel, two in a row. So I'm gonna do my best not to include any of that stuff into this video and just have it as a separate video idea for later. But yeah, let's get into writing and the projects that I've been working on over the years. Some of them finished, some of them completely discarded by now. Let's just start off by saying that I've always had a wild, vivid imagination. My nightmares, for example, used to be very awful and very, very detailed. And I still sometimes see very vivid, detailed dreams that I can recall bits very clearly even later. And then this resulted in me being like in my head quite a lot. Like I was just daydreaming away, and my mom actually thinks this is why I don't remember a whole lot about my childhood, for example, and some of my teenage years as well, because I was just not present. And there's this example of my brother and mom and I were walking in the city where we used to live, and my brother suddenly pointed out a building and said, "Hey, we've been there. There was this pet show." And mom was like, "Yep, that's right." And I was like, "No, never been there." And then apparently we've been to one of the coastal towns when we were kids, and I have no recollection of that. But according to my family, we've been there, so who knows? And I've always, ever since I got myself a CD player and a radio and a cassette player, it was all together, I've been listening to music, and music has been very important in shaping my imagination and yeah. And then of course when I started reading, I really got into like fantasy books, for example. And I used to borrow, like I think I read basically all of the fantasy books in our local library. And sometimes I went there so often that sometimes when I didn't have my card with me, they would still borrow the books for me, because loan out the books for me, because they knew me, they knew my name, they knew my address, they knew my mom, and they knew I would be back there, So So they would just, add the books to my library card, which was not exactly how you're supposed to be doing things, but they were nice, and I would spend hours in there and just browse books. And I've always loved going into bookstores and stuff like that. And my brother doesn't like to go into bookstores with me because he's embarrassed that I open the books and sniff at the spread, because the scent of the book is important. If it doesn't smell good, then it's probably not going to be a good book. Anyways, but yeah, I used to spend a lot of time in the library, and then once I ran out of the more interesting fantasy books, there were definitely a few that I discarded as like, this doesn't seem interesting. Then I would move on to like historical fiction and even religion fiction and stuff like that, and then young adults books, and then I strayed to the fantasy sci-fi section for adults. Like we had kids section, young adults, and then adults. And I remember there was this one library worker who was new or substitute or something, and when I went to the adult section, she was like, "You're not supposed to be there." And I was like, really? But the regular staff, they let me borrow basically whatever. I haven't really been that inspired by a lot of movies or series. Some anime, yeah, but video games have definitely inspired me. Like, for example, Final Fantasy series has been huge for me, Bioshock, Dragon Age, then most recently Halo, and the world of that. Yeah. And then regarding books, my favorite authors have been, well, the Dragonlance authors, Forgotten Realms series, and Alastair Reynolds. Sci-fi more in that man's, what's it called? Biography? No. But anyway, bookography. I don't know, but he's been very inspirational as well. His books a little bit complex, like even when I was reading books in Finnish, and now I have them in English, they can be quite complex, but they're still good, they're good stuff. And then our George R.R. Martin as well, Robert Jordan, and then I actually rarely have read Finnish authors, but Anu Holopainen is one of my role models, because she's a Finnish author, fantasy author. You can see it says Fantasia here. This is actually from the library that I used to go to quite a lot, because they were actually, I think they shut down, and they were giving out or selling their books, and so I made sure to grab any Anu Holopainen books that I could find. But she has really inspired me as a female author to, keep writing and keep aiming for publishing. Now, who else has been inspiration? There's so many. Tad Williams, that's for sure. Terry Pratchett. Plenty more, I've read hundreds of books in my life, and yeah. Now, one of the reasons why I've been hesitant about showing my writing, especially the stories, to anyone and publishing them is because I suffer from imposter syndrome, and I'm also a people pleaser. Now, this is related to the topic idea that I have, and I'm gonna discuss that more in another video, so I'm not gonna get too much into it, but these two aspects have definitely played a role in why I've been so hesitant about publishing. However, I have now finally decided to go for it. As some of you know, a couple of years ago, I started publishing my old poems, because I got into poetry when I was like a teenager, 14 or something like that. And over the years, I wrote hundreds of poems. I've lost count. And so I've been collecting these poems into books, 50 poems in each, and it's basically this anthology series that you can, read them all if you want in the order that they get published in, but you don't have to. You can just jump in whenever you want. And yeah, there's currently 4 of these books published with 50 poems in each, and the 5th one is gonna come out sometime next year. I think there's poems for at least 7 books, and then I have been writing some newer poems, so they're gonna be their own collection later on. Now, I also used to write a lot of short stories, and I've also published some of them last year as a digital version, and then this year as a paperback, softcover paperback. Now I'm thinking about having all of my books as hardcovers too at some point, but honestly the print versions of books it's a hassle, even on Amazon. It's like they do have clear instructions, and the one time that I've had to reach out to Amazon support, they were really helpful and responded very fast and all that. But yeah, covers are a hassle. I do make my own covers. I use iPad mini and the program called Procreate. So I make my own covers. I paint them or draw, and then use the fonts available on Procreate. The free version, I paid a lifetime license. I know there's lots more brushes and fonts available for Procreate, but there's already quite a lot in the standard version. So now the first story that I ever finished was when I was 12. It was the story about these teenagers who find themselves in a different a different world, and isekai situation basically. And I finished that when I was 12. I printed it out, I drew a cover, made a back cover text, and then my mom helped me bind it all together into a book basically. And I do think I gave a copy to one of my teachers back then, and some relative, but I don't think anything exists in my own external hard drives or anything like that. I don't think I have a copy of that anymore, and that's fine. I don't really mind. Then I did, as a teenager, I did finish a fanfic story for Final Fantasy VII. It's probably still somewhere out there, but it's probably very cringy, so we're not gonna get too into that right now here. And then the next story that I finished was, I think I started that one in 2005 or 6, and then I finished it in 2008, so when I was 18. And it was also another isekai story, fantasy setting and stuff like that. And now, before that, I had really focused on just fantasy. It was mostly what I was reading, but around 2010, I started incorporating more sci-fi elements into stories as well. So I got this idea about a world where, magic and science and technology are mixing. And since then, I've been working on that. So that's been over 10 years. And I did finish at one point a whole draft of the first part of the series. I always thought of it as a trilogy, and finished the first part, but then started writing the second part, and then I wasn't too happy about it. It just wasn't flowing the way I had wanted it to. And then reading through the first one, I was like, eh. So, but I'm definitely gonna work on that more. The story has expanded because I have received inspiration from new sources, and new music and all that. So the story has expanded to the level there that I think there's going to be the main series, which is going to be 3 books. Then there's going to be a prequel, for which I actually wrote quite a good deal recently. Like a good chunk of it, the beginning of the prequel. And then there's going to be a couple of sequels, 1 or 2, at least 1 sequel for sure, possibly 2. And between 2010 and 2018, I didn't really finish any big stories. Like, I just kept writing like poems and short stories, and kept trying to start writing this fantasy story, but it just didn't really flow anywhere. And I tried playing around, like I do remember doing this like zombie survival, like where you select what happens next kind of story. But that was very, very difficult. I have to applaud people who actually manage those type of stories pretty well. And it probably would have worked better as a mobile game or something, instead of like a book version. But yeah, I've been writing and practicing writing, and I have definitely seen some development in character and world building, and plot developments as well, like how complicated the plots can be. Now, this is something I want to talk in more detail in some other video, is the complexity of plots. Like, I do think that one reason why Western media especially can feel so stale at times is because, well, they're trying to pander to everyone, but also the stories, the characters, their connections, they can feel too simple at times. There are some very great exceptions for this, but I do feel like that we consumers are sometimes seen very, that we are dumb, that we won't get it if it's too complicated, so they dumb it down for us, and I don't like that. Like, they should make it more complicated, challenge our brains. But also, if it's too complicated, then it's not enjoyable anymore. You're just confused. Sometimes it's good when you're left just feeling confused, like, whoa, what was that? But most of the time, people don't want to feel stupid, Where was I? See, this is what happens when I start rambling. Now, yeah, so I've been struggling with getting anything done, basically. But in 2017, I decided that this is going to change. I'm going to work on projects, and I got several ideas for projects, not just the fantasy project, but many others as well. And I've been working on those on and off, gotten pretty far with them, but then realized that I need to flesh it out a little bit better, make the outline better and stuff like that. For example, in 2017, 2018, I got this idea about a young woman. This reflects my own life experiences a little bit, by the way. A young woman gets divorced, and I have never been married, but I was engaged for a very long time. But anyways, this young woman gets divorced, and she starts living for herself, and she starts getting back on her own feet and trusting herself more, and surviving in the real world. And I had many ideas for that story, but then at some point I realized that I need to flesh this out a little bit better, And I actually recently wrote down a better outline for it, so a more detailed one. And one thing that is troublesome for me sometimes is that I start writing by an outline, but then the stories, the characters, they start living their own life, like my hair. And then it's like, how do I get these people back in line, you know? How do I get them back to what I had planned? Sometimes I let them run free, you know, and just see where things go, and it works out, but sometimes it does not, like with this story that I mentioned, the young woman and her, you know, learning to live by herself and learning to trust people and stuff like that. So yeah, that is now on the back burner. Like, I am going to write on that more now that I have a better outline for it, but I have some other projects in the works for that. Now, then 2018, I started writing this zombie apocalypse story, which actually ended up having not too many zombies in it, but a lot of like emotional conflicts and like how the humans are behaving. And I wrote that in Finnish. I usually write in English, but for some reason this story flowed out better in Finnish. And the twist with this story that I really enjoyed, it was really difficult to make, and I've seen some authors use this as well. Maybe not in this particular way, but something similar. So each chapter is divided into 2 parts, and the first part is basically the now. At least in the chapter 1, that's now. Part 1, chapter 1 is now. And then chapter 1, part 2 is the past. How these characters met, how they came together. And then every first part of a chapter is going to be going backwards in time. And every second part of a chapter is going forward in time. Now, there's 30 chapters, right? And in chapter 30, these 2 timelines are going to meet. And that was interesting experiment. I really love experimenting. Like, if you have read my poems, then you may have noticed that I really enjoyed trying out different poetic forms, different styles and all that. And I really enjoy trying that out in story writing as well. And this is also seen in many of my short stories as well. So of course it reflects in my novel writing as well. Now, then in 2019, I translated that story into English. However, because it's my own story, I started adding things into the chapters. So now the English version had deviated from the Finnish version, and ever since then, every now and then, I've been trying to fix this. You know, I've been trying to match the 2 translations together. Now, I recently painted a cover for this. I think I mentioned this, but I do make my own covers by myself, so I have a cover for it. And I actually have a plan to, from December to the end of January, I will be working on editing the story, checking the translations, that they match, and make some other edits. Like, there's definitely things there that I need to edit. Either remove things or add things and flesh things out a little bit better. But the goal is that by the end of January next year, I will have my first novel published, finally. This is something I've been procrastinating about because, you know, imposter syndrome, people pleaser, blah, blah, blah. But it is now time to take that step. Now, it makes me a little bit nervous, to be honest, but yeah. Anyways, yeah, so that's the plan for that. Now, around that time, I also got this idea for a story with a guy who goes through this transformation, plastic surgery basically, and he doesn't recognize himself in the mirror anymore, and that makes him, you know, go mad. However, like, I wrote out a scene where he is having a mental meltdown basically over this fact that he can't recognize himself in the mirror anymore, but that was it. You know, I couldn't figure out like who exactly is this guy, and what made him do that decision, and what are the other characters like. like I did have this idea that there would be this crime thing going on, and that he had to, like, you know, to protect his identity and stuff like that, that he had to go through that change and all that. But yeah, I struggled with that, so I just left it there, like, okay, I have this idea and I'm eventually gonna get into it. And recently I got into it. About a month ago, I was listening to a video about a celebrity legal case, and this person who had made that video brought up this blog post of a letter where whoever had written that was going through this details of a meeting that supposedly took place 30 some years ago, this clandestine meeting, and described that meeting and what it was for and all that. And I listened to that again and started writing down notes, and then I started fleshing out a scene from those notes that I imagined could have happened, you know. And I realized I have my character motivations. I have it. And for the past month or so, I've been writing that story. And last week, actually, did I start 3 weeks ago? But anyways, last week I had 50,000 words for this project, and now I'm close to 70,000 words. And I'm actually at the stage where, so I have what I have written now, and I have the ending in mind. So now I just have to tie them all together and bring it all together. I'm trying to make it like it's not too complicated, but not too simple, and that it's not rushing too much, but it's not dragging things out too much. So it's really difficult, and I honestly have to just admire people who frequently write these type of books. You know, psychological thrillers and murder mysteries and you know, mysteries in general. It's really not that easy. So yeah, hats off to, you know, anyone who is doing this genre more, you know, on the regular basis. Really, really not easy. But yeah, I think it's shaping up pretty nicely. We'll see. We'll see how people will feel about that. But I think that's going to be the next book that I put out after the zombie story. So maybe not necessarily soon after it, but pretty close. And yeah, it makes me really happy that that I'm actually able to write and finish stories now. Now, then I came up with some other ideas over the years, and I don't really have, like, some of them have project names, like a title. Some of them already have a cover as well. Some of them are just, you know, pure ideas, like a softer story, for example. And then I have a memoir project going on. I'll get into these a little bit more very soon. Now, in 2020, end of 2020, I started playing this mobile game, an Otome, which is when I realized that I have always disliked romance, and I've always said I'm not a romantic, and I don't like romance. It's disgusting, blah blah blah. And playing that game, I realized I'm actually a closet romantic. You know, I actually do enjoy it. And now some of my favorite anime series, for example, are romance, like Violet Evergarden, I guess could be considered romantic. At least a very underlying theme there. Of course, there's more to it, but in my opinion, it's not very typical for me, at least. And then, you know, romantic killer is very good as well. But yeah, I noticed this in myself, and I started to try because in the past my characters used to be very aggressive, very violent, like yeah. like they were all always like warriors or soldiers, and they were usually very fucked up from their heads. But now I was like, I want to write more like, I mean, I had tried to write more realistic characters and more emotional characters with that story, for example, about that woman who divorces her husband and starts living her own life. But back then I guess I wasn't just mentally ready for that yet. That's why it didn't end up working out. But through that fanfiction that I started publishing on a website, posting on a website in early 2021, I started exploring that side of myself a little bit more and accepting it, and even admitting that sometimes it's okay to just sit back and watch a romantic movie. Preferably not romantic comedy, but I do want to try and write some of that too, because, you know, I think it's important, like I mentioned before, that I like to experiment, you know. It's important to write about what you yourself have experienced, but you need to expand your consciousness and imagination, you know. You have to stretch your being. I don't know how to explain it properly, but, you know, it's okay to jump into the unknown and explore things and write things from perspectives or things that you had never experienced personally or stuff like that. And research in writing is also interesting, because sometimes you find yourself researching things, you go down a rabbit hole, then another, and then you realize you haven't really written anything. But anyways, yeah, so I started that fanfiction project, and then at one point I started writing another fanfic, which was basically for Final Fantasy VII, but that never really came into anything. Then I had a long break from writing anything, almost a year. Then I got back into the Otome fanfic, and I got pretty far with it. And last summer I got an idea for a fanfic that's a crossover between Final Fantasy VII and 10. There's this fan theory that these worlds are connected, and I saw some elements in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that I think could support this fan theory. But anyways, this year, however, like I mentioned, I've been working on the prequel of that bigger fantasy sci-fi project, and now I've been working on this murder thriller, whatever you want to call it. And doing that, I just realized I don't have the time or the energy for the fanfic anymore. So I wrote a long author note in the recent chapter that, hey guys, I'm actually gonna take a break from this. Like last time, it was an unannounced break, and I know how it feels when you're reading a fanfic or even a book series, and then it just suddenly stops, you know? I've had some cases where they just stopped translating the story into Finnish. So, you know, back then English books weren't as readily available, so I couldn't get to finish those series. Anyways, so I know how it feels, you know, when things are left hanging, when you're left hanging. And I don't want to do that to my fanfic readers. So I told them, you know, guys, I have some chapters that I have written. The story is not finished as I had intended, but I'm gonna give you guys an ending that ties up some things and leaves you with some information that you might have wanted and to get to know about. But I'm gonna leave it open-ended so that if I ever want to get back into the story, then I can properly finish it. But yeah, I still have some chapters that I can post and share with them. And yeah, anyways, so now I really want to focus on my own original projects. And I also have a 9 to 5, you know, and I need to take care of myself, like my health, and, you know, I have friends and family to see and spend time with. So So yeah, I really need to prioritize my time, the project I spend my time on, and right now I'm spending it on this psychological thriller murder thingy. And then from December through January, I'm gonna be working on that zombie story, get it out in both languages, both Finnish and English. And I also have a short story collection that I can work on. Probably won't get it out this year as I had originally planned, but we'll see. And then, besides the lady who, you know, struggles to get back on her own feet, besides that story, I have a memoir project, which is basically sharing how I ended up in Ireland, what happened there, and what happened after. And then I have a story that is basically a blend of drama and comedy, maybe a little bit of romance there, and some sort of a plot twist for sure. Then I have one that is a blend of fantasy, magic, and emotional conflict, and romance as well in a way, and jealousy and curses, stuff like that. Then a present day person finds themselves in the middle of World War II, so time travel. And World War II is also something that I've always been fascinated about as a historical event, and the ripple effects it had all over the world and even to today's world. And one of my favorite books and TV series is The Band of Brothers. Now I know it's not perfect when it comes to telling telling the stories of these people, but it's still, there's just something about it that has really like struck a chord within me. Anyways, so this person finds themselves in the middle of World War II, and of course they have to try and find their way back home before they end up accidentally revealing the outcome of the war to either side of that war. Then I recently came up with this idea. I actually drew the cover first and then had the story idea that I could write this anthology of short stories possibly, or maybe even a proper novel of people who spend way too much time online and how it affects their physical health, mental health, their emotional state, their connections with other humans, and how they function in the society, you know. Really want to explore that, and I think it's a really important topic to, you know, to discuss and have it out there. Now, I mentioned that I would like to write a softer story, and by softer I mean like Hallmark movie kinda plots. So yeah, I just want to explore that because it's such an unknown world to me still. So yeah, I want to explore that. Then I would love to write a pure adult story, you know, adult content. That could also be just short stories, you know, put together in an anthology or whatever you want to call it. And then horror, you know, some spine-chilling ghost stories, paranormal stuff, and other such things, you know, basically a nightmare. Yeah, I used to see very horrible ones, so I could definitely incorporate some elements of my nightmares of the past into this one. But anyways, this video is turning out very long as well, and it is because I started rambling every now and then about things that didn't really matter. But hopefully this has sparked some interest in the stories that I've been working on and will be working on in the future. Like I said, I'm going to do my best to finally publish my first novel before the end of, well, let's say by the end of January 2025. And it's going to be that zombie story, and it's going to be in 2 languages, so it's going to be available for both English and Finnish speakers. Now, when it comes to translating my other stories, I think I might be able to do that with everything else but the big fantasy sci-fi project. You know, because, yeah. Anyways, I hope I remembered mentioning everything that I wanted in this particular video. If not, then whatever. But yeah, hopefully this has been interesting, and hopefully this brought some interest. Maybe I mentioned this, but I'm a little hesitant about showing my author name, like linking it to my face. But we'll see what happens with that, especially when I finally hold my first novel in my hand. And I would, of course, like to show the covers that I have come up with, because, like I said, I make them myself, and I am very proud of them. Anyways, hopefully everyone has a wonderful day ahead, or if it's evening for you, have a great night, sleep well, stuff like that. And yeah, see you guys hopefully next week. Hopefully I'll be able to record a video that is satisfactory, you know. Anyways, see you guys later. Bye.